So de volgende spreker is Kartikeya Mishra. Hij is toegepast fysicus. Hij promoveerde aan de Universiteit Twente en momenteel werkzaam als ingenieur in de optica. En hij beoefent de Vedische astrologie. Hij schrijft dat de filosofische inzichten van de Vedische astrologie kunnen helpen bij het begrijpen van de reden van ons bestaan, van ons karma en wat we ermee kunnen. En zijn lezing gaat over verschillende facetten van Venus, vandaag, Venusdag. Venus in de Vedische astrologie. En Dr. Kartikeya uses English language, so hopefully this is not a problem for most of us. Please.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to speak before you. I will like to start with the Venus in the Vedic astrology from matter to sublime. So when it comes to Venus, we already have a notion that it's a bit of a materialistic planet, that it has a certain kind of materialistic bent of mind we associated with money, luxury, and the prosperity that we have in our life.
Is it possible to speak a bit
louder? Okay, yeah, sure. I can increase the decibels, no problem. Yeah. So the Venus in the Vedic astrology, as far as our conception of Venus is concerned, in most of the cases we associate Venus with the luxury, we associate with the material wealth, we associate with the property, with the beauty, the relationships that we have. So of course that is one aspect of the Venus. But we can certainly talk about the Venus in other aspects. Maybe in the spiritual aspects or maybe in the intellectual aspects. I will try to present before you and summarize before you the two aspects of the Venus. So let me begin my presentation. Now, Venus in Vedic astrology, the contents of this presentation mostly will be dealing with the attributes of the Venus, how we perceive Venus, what is the conception of Venus in Vedic astrology. We will also talk about the houses of Venus, because we have to talk about, okay, in a chart, in a birth horoscope that you get it from for a particular person, what are those houses which are represented by Venus? What do they actually signify? And the third is that we will talk about a kind of dasha systems, or a kind of, how to say, periodic systems that we use in Vedic astrology in order to make predictions, or in order to assess the potential of the chart, that in which particular time you will be getting what kind of opportunities, maybe. Yeah, I'll move on. So, attributes of Venus. Now, in Vedas or in Puranas, you have all these wonderful and fascinating stories related to each particular planet. You know, you can talk about any planet and you can get so many stories that you can have multiple coffees over a day. But we will be restricting ourselves only to Venus for now. So, Venus in Vedic astrology is called Shukra. It's a Shukracharya. It is actually a preceptor of demons. So, it was a teacher of demons. And it is poetic, it is artistic, it is considered as very learned, refined, highly benefic. And sometimes, because it is very refined in nature, so you can easily assume that something which is very refined, very polished, if even there is the slightest of affliction, even if there is slightest of dirt on it, you can easily identify it, because it is so refined, it is so pure. Now, in Venus is considered as very learned in Vedas. It's considered as a great yogi, by the way. If you read Vedas, it is considered as a great yogi. He was the one who actually mastered his all the senses that we have. And there is a very special story related to Venus, but maybe I will not go into the story. But Venus is also actually a planet of regeneration, and in Vedic astrology, we call it that it possesses something called as the Sanjeevani Vidya. So Sanjeevani Vidya means that you will come back again from the ashes. So even if you die down, there is a chance of resurrection. So wherever the Venus is there in your chart, there is a chance of resurrection. You may die there, not in a sense, in a literal sense, but something bad can happen, but you might get a second chance. You can again come out from there. Okay. It's a Rajasic planet. Now if you read the Sankhya Darshan, or if you read different philosophies, you will find that there is basically Sattvic, Tamasic, and Rajasic, three kind of attributes, or we call it gunas. Venus is actually a Rajasic planet. You can put it like good, bad, and ugly, but bad is not a right word for the Rajasic, I would say. Okay. But you can call it as Sattvic, Rajasic, and Tamasic. Venus is a Rajasic planet. It's a planet of samsara. It's a planet of this world. Okay. So it can give you a lot in this world. Okay. Now there is another very good story, that is Venus has excellent understanding of technicalities of dharma. So dharma here I mean the technicalities of dharma I mean Vedic rituals or religious rituals. Indeed, in the Vedic folklore, Jupiter, who is considered as the great benefic, is a planet of wisdom. When he was supposed to teach his own kid, his own son, the technicalities or the performance of the various Vedic rituals, he sent his own son to Jupiter, to Venus, so that he can learn from Venus, because Venus was so good at that. Now, it is precisely because of this that it can address the problems that are pertaining to the mundane affairs. Now, the world we inhabit, it has certain, we live in a certain kind of society. So sometimes it has the best ability that it can address the problems pertaining to the worldly affairs. Short mention here, there is a lineage of astrology in India that is called as the Bhrigu astrology, Bhrigu. And Venus is considered as the son of Bhrigu. So that Bhrigu astrology, that complete domain actually belongs to Venus. I will move on because I have to be quick. Now, Venus in a birth horoscope. So suppose you go to a North India or even to go to South India, you will get a particular kind of horoscope, and you will have certain houses and you will have certain numbers imprinted on them. North Indian style and South Indian style are different, but we should not go by the styles, but by the content of it. Essentially, it is the same. Okay, it is just the matter of drawing. It is just the matter of topography, how we draw the chart. Now, if you look at a chart, if you get a chart from North India, you will often find that it is actually constructed in this particular way. Now, I have tried to put it in the most simplistic way possible. You see the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they go up to 12. So there are 12 houses, and you can clearly see 12 numbers. Now, I will not go into each of the numbers and each of the house, because it's not possible due to paucity of time. I will restrict only myself to the Venusian houses, the houses where Venus attains a certain kind of position. First, I would like to tell you the sign number 1, it actually just belongs to you. That, for example, you are born. You are born as an individual. You are casted in a material body. Your Atman or your soul has now acquired a material sense. Okay. Now you have fallen on the earth. Okay. So now what to do with the body? Okay. Now the first house of Venus, where the Venus actually holds, how to say, a domain, a dominance, that is called the house number 2. This is the house number 2. Now house number 2 is normally we call Taurus. Okay, now I will not go into the signs and the houses. Let's assume house number 2, sign number 2 is Taurus. Very simple. This house actually represents speech, it represents food, it represents your eating habits, it represents your face, eyes, sustenance, nourishment, and your family background. Okay. It also represents your accumulation capacity. Now this is a very small word, but it has a very big meaning. What we accumulate can be something that is gross, not gross, but that can be completely material. Like, for example, we can accumulate wealth in our bank accounts, or we can accumulate a lot of, but we can also accumulate a lot of habits. Now the habits that we actually accumulate, they might come from the family. Okay. Now this is something very important. Now another very important stuff is the attributes of this house are fixed. Okay. Fixed means that you cannot change what you have got in the second house. It's very hard to change. Okay. Whatever is placed in the second house is bit hard to change. Now, or let's put it this way, what is placed in the Taurus is hard to change. It's not easy to change. Because your family background, it's something that you cannot change. Yeah? I cannot change where I was born. The family is fixed. Everything can change in my life, but the family is fixed. I cannot change my lineage. Venus also represents your lineage, it represents your DNA, because DNA is something that is very refined. It also represents your DNA. Now, there's something that is very hard to change. Now, I have mentioned about the eyes. Now, Venus, we know, is a planet of beauty. So, it's a planet of perception. And we know the old English saying that beauty lies in the eyes of beholder. So, it's a very Venusian phrase actually. The beauty lies in the eyes of beholder. if you have a good Venus in your chart, you know how to appreciate beauty. You can appreciate beauty even when others find it not very beautiful. But you have the skill, you have the instinct that you can go ahead and appreciate that. Okay, I have to move on. Then the other very important house of Venus is actually the 7th house. Now the 7th house is Libra. It's a very, very important house in today's world. It's a house of entertainment, it's a house of partnerships, it's a balance. Okay. Now the thing is that you can't win in Libra. They always say in Vedic astrology, you can't win in Libra. It means you can only strike a balance in Libra. It's not possible to win against your spouse. The 7th house is the house of your spouse. It's impossible to win against your spouse. If you want to be in a good relationship, you must try to strike a balance every time, rather than always trying to win an argument. Arguments are not going to lead you anywhere. Okay. And Venus, by the way, is not a very argumentative planet. It is least interested in all that. Now, Libra lies at the center of the horoscope. So if you draw a line from there to here, Venus, this house number 7 actually falls exactly in the center. Now, attributes of this house are movable. Sign number 7 is actually a movable sign. Movable only means that, yeah, it can be changed. Your relationships can change with life. But family background, no. It's done, fixed, once for all settled. It cannot be changed. Okay. 12th house is the house where Venus gets exalted. Now, exalted means it gets a very superior position. Let's put it this way. It gets a very superior position. The 12th house is actually the house of meditation. It's the house of sleep. It's the house of solitude. It's the house of letting off. And it is also a spending capacity. Now, you remember, the Venus is actually something that represents pleasure. And I talked about pleasure. And so one of the most, one of the most pleasurable things is that you see money growing, or you see the things getting accumulated in your life in the 2nd house. But Venus, which is actually the sign of pleasure, it actually gets exalted in the 12th house. It says that the true pleasure does not lie in accumulation. It actually lies in letting things off. How you spend your own resources, because you should never confuse 2nd house with the money only. I lay stress sometimes on money, I don't know why. But it's not about money, it's your accumulation. It's the resources that you have garnered for your own sustenance, for your nourishment. You have to let it off. It is also very important in life to get meditation, sleep, solitude. Because these are the things that nurture creativity, isn't it? It is only solitude that nurtures creativity. Hardly there is any fellow who is very creative and already living in the samsara. It's tough. I'm not saying it's not possible. It's tough. You have to be a bit aloof. The planet of creativity like Venus actually gets exalted in the house of solitude, where there is nobody. Okay. Now, of course we want good food in the house number 2. I told you that we all like good food. People who have good Venus, they want to dine and wine in a good restaurant. They just can't eat anything. They don't like anything. They have certain standards set for themselves. But if you actually look, why we want to have good food and why we want to have good resources, the only thing we want in life is actually a good sleep in the night. If you don't have a good sleep in the night, all your resources are just worthless. Okay, that's a hard statement, but that's a very true statement in today's life. And so what happens in 2nd house, you accumulate, and in 12th house, you have to give off. Okay. So you have to sleep. Venus is exalted in the house of sleeping. Okay. You should not forget that. Now, in Vedic astrology, I will come to quickly to another thing. In Vedic astrology, the 2nd and 7th house are called the markas. Now, markas actually means killers. Now, somebody, for example, if you observe a chart of somebody and you say that, okay, when you are going to pass through bad times, sometimes you examine the 2nd house and 7th house and you try to make the prediction. You try to assess the potentiality of the chart. Okay, this time, just be a bit careful with these particular matters. Now, who can actually kill me? The only thing that can actually kill me is something that is very refined. Because if the most refined part gets a little bit dirtier, we will be able to identify it very quickly. Now, if you look into the Vedic system, the 2nd house and the 7th house, so the natural house, the 2nd house and the 7th house is actually the marka. Marka is the killer. killer should not be taken in a very literal sense, you know, because it is going to come and kill you. No, it can harm a certain aspect of your life. Okay. Now, if you actually look about the spiritual or the more nuanced, more ethereal aspects of Venus, what actually kills us is the pleasure of our senses. You know? So here we are going more into the philosophy. That, for example, in the second house is the house of seeing. We want to see something. Okay? What we want to see is something that is always beautiful. We don't like ugly stuff. What we want to eat is always good. We have a choice. We have a standard. We can't compromise. Okay. It's the pleasure of the senses. So we see certain objects around us, the modes of cognition, we try to understand them, and we keep on accumulating them. The taste also we keep on accumulating. It's not just the material thing, I always say. It's the taste that also you keep on accumulating. This other thing that actually can kill us sometimes, and that's a harsh statement, is the external world. Now, that's very important. If you're too much involved in the external world, probably you're going to get a lot of pain in your life. Okay. Most of the time, not every time. I'm sorry to say. We have to correct it. Because the external world, when you are dealing with the external world, now dealing with the external world is something that is very important. You cannot avoid it every time. You have to engage with the external world. Now, that is why Venus actually owns this seventh house, because a good Venus will always tell you how much to engage with the external world. It will not make you completely engrossed in the external world. It will not tell you just go ahead and do whatever you want to do with relationships. No, it will tell you, yes, this is the boundary, you should not cross, and this is the sphere and you should go ahead and enjoy life. Don't restrict yourself. Okay. Now, the external world, I sometimes say, is the ultimate killer, but I say it in a very, you should not take it seriously. I mean, it's not, you should take it seriously, but you should not take it literally. Okay. It's not literally. Now, it can be greatly benefit in case we are enlightened to know how to deal with it. If we know how to deal with the external world, people with good Venus, they know how to deal with the external world. Now, this part I will come to the later on. Seventh house is the house of, seventh house prevents us from moving ahead sometimes. So, if you go from the first to seventh house and then you go from the 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 house. So, I'll move quickly. I also want to talk a little bit what about the other planets. Okay, Venus is something that we have already touched upon. We have just touched the surface actually. But what about other planets? Now, other planet, then I thought that why not I pick up Moon? Now, Moon is a significator of mind. We know that in Western astrology, in Vedic astrology, Moon is a significator of mind actually. And what is mind actually? Mind, most of the cases, is driven by senses. Now, if you read the literature from India or many times from the West also, they always say that your mind is completely engrossed by your senses. Your senses have captured your mind. And the idea why we are born is that we want to be intellectually free. We don't want to be the slave of the senses, but we actually want to master the senses. Okay? So that's why Venus was a great yogi. He was able to master his senses. Now, this is the house of accumulation. It is the house of pleasure of senses. Okay? Now, if you look at the moon in any horoscope, I told you, is the significator of mind. So, second house Taurus is the exaltation house of the moon. You can just take it like that. Moon owns a certain house called Cancer, but in the house number 2, or to say in the sign of Taurus, it gets exalted. Means it gets a special position. Let's take it like that. Gets a special position. Now, why it gets a special position in the second house? Because mind actually loves to deal with all these kind of senses. You know, mind loves pleasure. We are born in the material world, and in this material world, we actually want to be, want to enjoy maximum pleasure, minimum pain. Okay? We want to be engrossed in everything that is fancy, everything that is beautiful. Mind loves all that. Moon is exalted in the sign of Taurus. Now, I have to talk about the 8th house a little bit here, because I think we all are interested in metaphysics, etc. And so we must be having some 8th house, combination in our chart. Otherwise, it's impossible that we can be really so much interested. 8th house, if you see in the chart, always represents death. It represents longevity of a particular person. It represents metaphysics. It represents great transformation, a transformation that you'll always remember. It represents deep scientific research. It also represents mysticism. It also represents mysticism. Now, the second house is the house of the accumulation of your senses, and the eighth house, I have mentioned here, eighth house is the house where moon is debilitated. Now, sign number 8 or the Scorpio, you can say that the moon is exalted in the house number 2, in sign number 2, but the moon is debilitated here. Moon is in a very bad position in this particular house or in sign number 8. Why? Because as I said, this is not just this house, some commas are missing here, but actually this is also a house of isolation. You don't get any help in this house. It's actually a very tough house to deal with. It's not an easy house. Okay. So moon is exalted there, but moon is debilitated there. Why? Because our senses are so much engrossed in the matter that we don't like isolation. And that is precisely the reason why we say that it is hard to meditate. Why? Because it is hard to silence the stream of your thoughts. The thoughts are continuously flowing and you have to put a break on them. It's really hard. It's not easy. Okay. And if just to mention one thing little bit more, it is not mentioned here, but it is also a house of samadhi. Now, samadhi actually in Indian tradition, it means where you have completely relinquished your senses, you have completely given off your senses, and you see you are in continuous spiritual state of bliss. Continuous spiritual state of bliss. All the distinctions between the objects and subjects are completely gone. Okay. So, for example, whenever a person, and 8th house is also the house of isolation, I always told you. So, for example, if you go to any spiritual master in India and he will initiate you spiritually, so he will give you some kind of mantra or he will tell you to do certain kind of practices, the first thing that he is going to do is to tell you what to eat and what not to eat. The first thing that he is going to tell you. The master is first going to destroy your second house. No one else can destroy your second house, trust me, no one else. It is only a great spiritual master, a person with a great insight, that has the ability to destroy your 8th house. You will tell him that, see, I have accrued so much of family entitlements because I said that it is your family background. People sometimes tell very much about their family background. I belong to this particular family, it's so aristocratic, blah, blah, blah. He will tell you, the spiritual master is going to tell you, leave off, I don't care. I don't care about your family backgrounds. You will say that, I have accumulated so much of wealth. He says, I don't care. You can also say, that look, I have inherited so much of good from my lineage, because Venus is as I said, is a planet of lineage. And you will say that I have accumulated so much of bad from my lineage, not just from the lineage, but from the external world. He will tell you the good and bad are all the part of duality. You are in the house of Advaita Vedanta. You don't worry about all that, because the good and bad, whatever you have learned from the materialistic world. They have their own limitations. Now you are in the house of non-duality. You are in the house of duality. Okay? So this is something very important. That is why the moon. And of course, now I want to also want to tell a more sublime principle here of Vedic astrology, or of astrology. Let's put it that way. When we say about the 8th house, we always say 8th house is a tough house. Go to any astrologer, always say 8th house, and it's really a tough house to deal with. It's not an easy house. Okay. Now, the 9th house is actually the house of principles. I just want to touch upon a little bit here. So we have seen the cycle. You are born here. You came here. You came in the 8th house. Now you have to move to the 9th house. 9th house is actually the house of principles. Now I have stated already that 8th house is the house of longevity. So I have told you that this is a house that is going to restrict your age. Ideally you should stop here, because it actually tells you how long you are going to live. So you are finished here. If you are already finished here, then what are you doing in the 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th house? It's a very good question, frankly. It came to my mind that why are we going to the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th house? Because the 9th house is the house of principles. It is the house of Jupiter. It is the house of wisdom. When I say that 8th house is a house of great transformation, your ego, your material body has to be completely transformed in order to become a very principled fellow. In India or in many other kind of Vedic traditions or in spiritual philosophy, we always say that a person who is really very principled, or it is also house of Guru, house of Jupiter. A person who is really very wise, his or her ego has to be dissolved. it has to be completely vanquished. It has to be dissolved away. Now, I will not go there, but 8th house is also some of a deep pit. It's a watery house, so we should not forget. Your ego has to be dissolved in the 8th house, then and only then you can go in the 9th house. It's very difficult. Most people, and indeed, if you read, I think I may be wrong here, but I still want to mention it. I think Varahamir mentioned, he was a great astrologer and astronomer in India. He actually classified the whole horoscope into 2 groups. He said it goes from 1 to 8 and then it goes from 9 to 12. So he says that he says that 8th house is the real house that you have to cross in order to get into the 9th house and the 10th house. Just to mention that 10th house is actually the house of your karma, the kind of karma that you do in the real world. But if you read Bhagavad Gita, for example, it says about the Nishkam karma, the actions that you do without any anticipation of the fruits that you might bear out of it. But Saturn actually rules the 10th house, and Saturn is a very hard taskmaster. So Saturn actually says that you have to do Nishkam karma, but many people don't do it. I also don't do it. Okay, so let's move ahead. In the dasha systems in Vedic astrology, I will quickly go through it. So there are many kind of dasha systems that you go in Vedic astrology. So for example, if you have to predict for a certain person, or if you want to give a life sketch of a certain person, you actually follow certain kind of rules that are mentioned. So this is something that I also learned from the books and masters. So most common dasha system is actually employed is Vimshotri dasha. It is called a Vimshotri dasha. The name is called Vimshotri, and it is by a Parashara. So Parashara was a great rishi. He wrote 2 brilliant books. One brilliant book called the Brihat Parashara Hura Shastra. Okay, and you see the Vimshotri dasha, always started from the nakshatra of moon. So it's a very moon-based system. In that sense, it's a very moon-based system. And nakshatra is nothing; it's a constellation. Okay. Now, nakshatras are the lunar mansions of the moon. There are 27 nakshatras, or you can say there are 27 constellations in Vedic astrology. There can be 28th also, but we don't have to talk about it here. That's Abhijit. Now, moon covers approximately 13 degree 20 minutes in one day. Approximately 13 degree 20 minutes in one day. And therefore, it covers the entire zodiac of 360 degree in approximately 27 days. Okay. You can actually see it here. So 360 degrees is the total zodiac that you have. And then it's 30 into 12. If you have 12 rashis of each 30 degrees, each equal house system. Or you can have 13.2 into 27. Okay. Now, each constellation of 13 degree 20 minutes is further divided into 4 quarters. 4 quarters means we call it padas. So for example, you have 13 degree 20, you divide it into 3 degree 20, and you have 108. Okay. Now, I don't want to go into the technicalities of it, because I want to make you understand the essence of it, that why is it so? So actually in the Vimshotri dasha system, we start with Ketu, we go with Venus, we go with Sun, Moon, Mars, Rahu, Jupiter, Saturn. This is actually, one is not mentioned here, it is actually Mercury. It is not yeah, something is missing actually. Mercury is missing here. Yeah, Mercury is missing here. And I read, or I understood that there's a very good reason why we have actually put the dasha system in this particular order. So when you are actually a Ketu, Ketu is definitely a very, very spiritual planet. It's a very spiritual planet. But if you actually look at kids, the kids are like headless. They are very spontaneous. And if you look into the mythology of Ketu, it is actually south node. The south node has no head. Rahu has head, but south node has no head. So little kids are like headless. They roam around here and there. They can do anything suddenly. That's Ketu. They can do anything suddenly. If there is a kid, he can touch anything. He can. Then you come in the dasha of Venus. You become adult. Okay? This is actually 7 years. Then it is 20 years. So don't go by that years right now. You come to that. So Venus is something like you become adult. You form relationships. You get traumas in relationships, etc., etc. Then you get to the dasha of Sun. You understand yourself. You say, no, I am also somebody. It's not like that I'm going to associate with everybody. Okay? I have my own sense of kingdom. You develop a sense of kingdom. Slowly when you mature, you actually get into the moon phase. You understand that, no, I am not the only thing in this world. There are other beings, and I need to have the emotional connect with them. Okay. Now you get into the dasha of Mars. Now the Mars is actually the army commander. It is a planet of great responsibility. It is not just a planet of initiation. It's also a planet of responsibility. Army commander has a huge responsibility. You know. Then you quickly, I have just mentioned here the functions, but they are, we can list many functions, but okay. Now from the Mars we go into the dasha of Rahu. The dasha of Rahu is actually the dasha of the North Node. Now we know Rahu has only head. It does not have the lower part of the body, and it's many times it's called the planet of Maya. It's the planet of illusion. And if you read many of these texts and books on the Vedic astrology, you'll find that many times they say that Rahu will give you a lot in the start of the dasha, and it will take everything by the end of the dasha. So why they want to say it is he wants to show you all colors of Maya. You know, and look, what can I do for you? I can give you everything, whatever you want. Most unexpected wealth, unexpected relationships, but I can take away everything whenever I want. And after that comes the dasha of Jupiter. That is the dasha of wisdom. The dasha of wisdom tells you that, okay, now you have seen all the contours, all the flavors, all the colors of Maya. Have you gotten wise? Have you understood the world now? Okay. In this dasha, it is expected that a person should become more wiser. Okay. Sometimes you don't become more wiser. Then comes the dasha of Saturn. So it says that now I am going to give you the results of your deeds, because it really does not matter, because you haven't learned the lesson properly. In case you have learned the lesson properly, I am still going to give the fruits of your action, but maybe in a more pleasant way. But if you haven't learned your lesson properly, I am a very hard taskmaster. I am going to grill you a lot. Then the fruits of the karma. The last planet that comes is actually Mercury. You know, and Mercury is like the second childhood. You know, you are again dependent on others. You know, it was Ketu that was the first child, I think. Yeah? And the Mercury, you again become a child. You are always dependent on others, like a little kid. Okay. And if you look at the dasha years that are allotted, 7, 20, 8, 6, 10, and if you sum them up, it comes out to be 120 years. Now Parashara thought 120 years, but nowadays we don't live up to 120 years, isn't it? So if you go to an astrologer, he or she first should be able to estimate your age a little bit, okay? What is the time you have on the earth? And accordingly, they must divide it, okay? So there is another variation of the Vimshotri Dasha they use called the Tribhagi Dasha, where they divide it in order to get to your age and then make these predictions, okay? I move on quickly. That sort of, so this is I think this is the last slide I have, the sort of questions that you can get in Vedic astrology. Suppose I say in the Venus is in the second house in Taurus. I say Venus in the second house in Taurus. So we know a person might be able to accumulate good amount of wealth, or might be able to pursue a lot of wealth. He might be able to accrue a good amount of resources in his life for nourishment, for sustenance. Suppose instead of Venus, I put Jupiter there. Now you might be able to accumulate a lot of wisdom in your life. Okay, it can happen. It can happen that you might accumulate a lot of wisdom in your life. I say, this is the first question that I pose, Venus in the second house in the Taurus. But I can make this question even more refined. I can say, let's suppose Venus is in the second house in the constellation of Mrigashira. Now I have listed the list of constellations on the previous slides. So Mrigashira, if you look into the etymology of the Mrigashira actually means a deer head. Mrig means a deer and Shira means head. So it's actually a deer head. And if you look here, Mrigashira is ruled by planet Mars. Yeah? So Taurus is ruled by Venus, but Mrigashira is ruled by Mars. Okay, so it's very important. Mrigashira is ruled by Mars. Now I am saying that Venus is in the second house in the constellation of Mrigashira. So it actually means that I may be accumulating a lot of resources and I am always looking out for them. Why? Because a deer is always running in the jungle, you know, and he has he has a fragrant belly here, and he can smell the fragrance, but he still keeps on running in the jungle. He does not know that the fragrance is actually with him or with her. So that's very important. It actually tells you that you might be having all sorts of resources for your own comfort, but you still might be looking for more. And you are not realizing that you already have everything. Why are you worried? But if it is in Mrigashira, and again it is in the constellation of Mars, so Mars is actually action. So very action. You are very action oriented. You keep on hunting for it. Suppose this Venus falls in your 7th house, again in the Mrigashira. In Taurus, you might be hunting for relationships every now and then, even without realizing that you have the best partner in the world. So it can happen anywhere. So this is something that is very, very unique. And suppose I say that Venus is in the 2nd house in the constellation of Mrigashira, but in the 1st quarter of Taurus. So 1st quarter, I told you 3 degrees 20 minutes. Now each of these quarters, they also have their meaning. 1st quarter is actually the quarter of dharma or the principles. 1st quarter is actually the quarter of dharma or the quarter of principles. So if the Venus is in the constellation of Mrigashira in the 1st quarter of Taurus, you might be looking for relationships, or you might want to accrue wealth because you have a certain kind of orientation towards how you want to accrue the wealth. You have a certain strategy to accumulate the wealth. So for example, if you have in the 4th quarter, 4th quarter is moksha or liberation. Don't take it loosely that it is actually moksha only. It can also mean losing, because in moksha you actually lose your body. In salvation you lose your body. So it has to be interpreted in a very mundane way also, that you might be completely liberated. So it can happen that you might eventually lose the relationship. It does not matter how much you hunt for relationships here and there, you hunt or resources here and there, you might lose everything. It does not matter. A good astrologer, or I think you can make pretty good predictions just by signs and houses and planets. But still, this is the last slide I have done. This is the last one. This is the last one. I will stop after. So there are other systems also you employ. For example, there is a system of. I told you about the Vimshotri Dasha. You can have a Kal Chakra Dasha. The Kal Chakra Dasha is one of the best dashas that Parashara said. And this is the dasha that was told by Lord Shiva to Lord Parvati, actually. And he said that if you want to look at a person's horoscope, please always look at this dasha. Never miss it out. Okay. And then there are Yogini Dasha, Char Dasha. There are many dashas and different variations. We can't go. And other important aspect of the Vedic astrology is reliance on the higher divisional charts. So for example, you can have a D1 chart, but from the D1 chart you can construct many other charts also. D9, D3. Each chart has its own significance. For example, D9 is a chart that you have to look for the fruits of your action. So for example, I do a certain kind of action in my D1, but what will be the fruit of it? Eventually, whether it will be good or bad, you have to look at D9. Okay. Then there are D3, D60. There's one particular chart that is Dashamsha. It's very important if you want to look for karmic or professional progress. Okay. It's just a D10 chart. All charts, they look like the same, but they all have different meanings. And that was the last slide actually. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. One quick question.
De paddats, verkrijgen die de kwartgedeelte van de horoscoop ook?
Sorry, wat zei jij? Want hij moet het vertalen.
De paddats, het zijn die kwart van de nakshatras. Die zijn eigenlijk een vertaling eigenlijk in een volgorde van het eerste, tweede, derde, vierde kwart van de horoscoop.
He was asking what are the padas in nakshatra. So you said each nakshatra can have 4 padas.
Yeah.
And now what the question, the other part was, can you translate?
Ik versta het heel slecht met 1 oor, dus ik even dat al.
Hoe je dat nou?
Misschien zo meteen even dat we nu even 5 minuten pauze om even
de Vedische astrologie.
Ja. So because we have to just have a
Thank
quick
you
drink,
so much.
Yeah, thank you.
and then we move on to the. Thank you very much.